Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. You've got Jon Hittinger
and
Jared LaCrone.
That's you.
And we get the privilege of bringing you episode number 69 of the Central Weekly. But wait, there's more. We're in a brand new, to us, studio here at Central Christian Church in Mount Vernon, Illinois. We're christening Studio 3.
Okay.
Because the first one was ministry building. Second one was upstairs in a random room, which it's awesome because they're going to make that into like a small group room.
Okay.
And then now we're backstage
in another random room.
Another random room across the office from your old office.
Yeah.
Back here in Creative Arts Land. So we're back behind stage. So you might hear some stage stuff. Somebody hops on stage, starts singing. You might hear it in this podcast.
Might.
But we'll see. But it's going to be fun because we got the new studio. We can share a space now with the photography team, which has been going pretty good because the photography team has been doing a good job of capturing what's been going on the weekend and with everything. Just telling the story of Central through photos. A lot of people like to see that on social media. So
a picture is worth a lot of words.
Yeah.
1,000 words.
1,000 words. Well, we're in episode 69 of the Central Weekly, episode number 69. But here's the week 4 of Boats. I don't know what that noise was. Boats 4. And then we get the special guest that we're going to bring in the podcast is Heather Luttinen.
Heather Luttinen.
Yes. Heather has been going to Central for quite a while now.
Okay.
She's got 2 kids, her husband, and she's got a great story. I learned her story when we were in a small group together a couple years ago. And she's been on my radar to ask just because she's really got some things that I think a lot of people can learn from lessons. And when she writes a book, I'm hoping to get a credit on that book when she writes this book.
Oh,
so
nice.
The podcast might be help her formulate that book she's going to write about what God has done. So we'll get into that. Heather's going to be our guest this week on the Weekly. Now, week 4, we're looking at the Apostle Paul.
Right.
And the title is
Paul aboard.
You're right.
Yep.
I bet they said that every time they put him
I would
on a boat.
think
all
they
of his
would
missionary journeys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They would try to not get him on the board on the boat just so that somebody could yell it.
Yes. This was a good sermon because you had not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, 5.
Cinco.
5, yes, 5 lessons. It is funny. We're a little closer. The tables that we have in this new podcast are narrower.
We are closer.
We're back to these were the original tables.
Okay.
Anyways, okay. So 5, you make the point with Paul, the apostle.
Right.
Big guy, wrote most of the New Testament.
Right.
And he was not one of the original disciples. He came on later. If you don't know Paul's story, you got to listen to it. And even if you want to go into more of specifically to his shipwreck story, you talked about that last year.
I did on
Rock Island.
Yeah, February of 2022. I did a sermon, actually, because I thought the sermon was called Rock Island, but it wasn't. It was actually the New Normal Part 2. And I just said in it, if I was going to title this sermon, it would be titled Rock Island. So that's why I said from stage, or will stay from the stage. If you want to go back and look at it, it's on YouTube. It's under the name New Normal.
New Normal. Now, Rock Island was the name of the Central Podcast episode when we talked about it.
There you go.
Because I think we brought in, who did we bring in? Hope Group, Julie Wilson, to talk about her Hope Group and just the experiences she had, the loss of loved ones. So I remember it being a really neat week in the fact that we were talking about loss, helping people, being a shelter from the storm. And so really, if you're looking at the shipwreck, that's the sermon for you.
Yeah, if you're looking at the island portion of the story.
The island, you got to say it with an accent.
Yeah, right. If you're looking for that portion of the story, go back in February of 22 and listen to the New Normal Part 2. But this week, I felt like the perspective God would have us take this week was more on like just what happened on the boat.
The boat.
Because I feel like there are 5 solid practical lessons for us to learn from the time on the boat.
Now, we do, because you go through this on Thursday, then you go through this on Friday.
Right.
I have the Thursday.
Oh,
so you're going to have to help me with it in the number. But here's the thing. You talked about this first. But Paul, I mean, he is different from all the other disciples in the fact that he is probably on a boat the majority of his later life.
A whole lot.
Has to be.
I mean, if you
showed that map.
I showed that map, and on the far right-hand side there, I mean, like the Sea of Galilee, which the disciples spent so much time on, is like a drop in the bucket to the waterways that Paul would travel, and he just spent so much time on a boat.
I mean, that gives you a lot of time to write, which he did. But I think most of the letters were written from prison. So, I mean, Paul was either on a boat or in prison or telling people about Jesus Christ.
Or was he in prison on a boat?
Oh.
That's how he was going to Rome.
Yeah, that is true.
I know.
I mean, a prison boat. I thought you were making a joke there.
Oh, or. No, yeah.
You didn't have that many jokes this week.
No, I didn't have any.
It was funny because you did a couple, like I don't think you knew, because you were talking about the sailors, and you're like, they would see that the Lord, and it was like, I don't think he's trying to go there, but I'm picking up on it.
Okay, so let's while we're talking about it, how about Fathom?
Fathom. I knew of it. It didn't make me laugh. But it made me, oh yeah, Fathom.
Fathom, maritime reference.
So that's what you want in a joke. People go, oh yeah.
Yeah, it's a highbrow, high level. Like really makes you think.
Highbrow comedy.
Comedy.
That's what yours is definitely not highbrow. But here's, okay, so, and back to that, the miles on a boat, because you're right in the fact that map that you showed, I mean, he's going all over the Mediterranean, and he's telling Gentiles specifically about Jesus and the new way. And again, I'm going to bring up the Chosen. Ding, 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 ding. The Chosen reference. And it is true, so much so that those disciples were doing something brand new. And so many different people were attracted to Jesus's message. It wasn't, I mean, yes, it was for the Jews first, and God did that through the Jews, and they still his chosen people, but yet there was so many different people, from Pharisees, yes, but also to prisoners, to prison guards, to Gentiles, to people that were, that had no idea about the one true God. They were now in tune with what he was because of what Jesus' message was. Yeah. And so that's the neat thing, is that Paul is preaching this message, but in this message, there are so many lessons for us, specifically with the boat itself.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think there's 5 practical lessons there for us to glean from.
Number 1 that I have, the ropes around the hull. That was
okay.
Not the
so
number.
Basically, we reversed it. Speak up is
okay.
is numero uno. So we went speak up, cut away the lifeboat, let it run, tie ropes around the hull, and lighten the load.
Okay,
that's how we went for the weekend. So the first one is speak up, and that's really the first thing that Paul did before they even set sail, before they left port. Paul spoke up with a message from God and said, "Men, I see disaster ahead." Yeah. But they all said, "Okay, we're going to go ahead and go anyways." Sure enough, things started to get rough, and Paul spoke up again and said, "Good news, bad news," sort of thing. The ship's going to go down,
but we're all going to be fine.
But we're all going to live if we stay on board.
Let me back up 1 second, because missionary journeys. So we talked about the missionary journey. Now this is when he's in prison for his faith, and he's going to Rome. Explain again why Rome.
Okay, so they had him in prison. And really, I don't know why he didn't play that card quicker.
I know.
So he's in prison for some stuff that he didn't do. And finally he says, I'm a Roman citizen. And Roman citizens at the time had like premier privileges, and so they were like, whoa. And so basically he was able to use his Roman citizenship to appeal to the highest court in the land, and which meant they had to transport him to Rome.
It's basically like if you went in and you did something wrong, you could throw this card out there, and then your court would go straight to the Supreme Court.
Right.
Straight to it.
Right.
And so he's getting this, but it is funny that he speaks up, and it makes sense that he was not listened to, because most prisoners will yell, "I'm innocent." Sure. And for him to say, let's not get on board because it's going to sink.
Right.
I bet they said that a lot. The prisoner's like, "No, don't put me on there. This boat's going to sink."
Yeah, bad stuff's going to happen for you, man.
They're like, "Okay, no, be quiet, get on."
Yeah.
But yeah, it really is. And it brings me to the point too, where like, I wonder what the faith of those officers that had Paul were like, because they're Roman officers, so they're all about Rome, but yet, so you think when Paul's preaching to them, he's definitely got to be preaching to them at this point. Yeah. It's just curious about, going that, but I love that was your first point, because speaking up is something we all have to do. That's something we have to do regardless of where we're at, if we're in chains or not in chains.
Yep. Even in the hard times, even when you don't want to, even when it's uncomfortable, even when you're in a storm on a boat surrounded by unbelievers, even when you're not in charge, speak up, because God can give you influence in the situation.
Yeah, I think that's really good. It's because he was not in charge on this one.
No.
Number 2, you had cut away the lifeboat.
Cut away the lifeboat. Yeah. So the lifeboat in this story, if you remember the scripture, basically the deal is Paul says everybody has to stay on board. The experience of the sailors says that's lunacy, right? So we're gonna pretend like we're gonna drop a few more anchors off the front, but really what we're gonna do is lower the lifeboat, and then we're gonna get in it and get out of here. Paul sees it happening, and then they end up cutting the lifeboat away and letting it drift away. But the lifeboat in this story really represents our way.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like God has a way. He says certain things. We get instructions, but we say, I don't see it. And so I'm going to go ahead and lower my way anyway. I'm going to go ahead and put my boat in the water anyway.
I mean, it really reflects back to last week where God called them into the storm. God called them on the boat. And the same thing with Paul. That was his challenge, but he knew from the very beginning, yes, he is going to this boat is going to go down, but yet he's going to be okay.
Right.
And so how often do we have a mission, God's given it to us, but yet we're going to choose our own way? Like the Roman officers, they heard what Paul said. Again, they're probably not going to, take it with a grain of salt, and they're probably, most likely, but how often do we hear God speak clearly and then try to do it our own way? Or when things don't go the way that we think they're going to go, like, oh, this storm's going to be bad. I understand that. But when it gets really bad, then you're like, okay, no, maybe he didn't mean it this bad. Maybe I do need to rethink this plan. But it's such a good lesson. And it is just a weird thing that like they were trying to be deceptive and then cut it. But then they ended up cutting it.
I mean, cut the line to the lifeboat and let your way drift away.
Yeah. But I love his ways are always better. Trust. And you say that a lot in your lessons. And I think it's something that we have to remember daily.
I used Isaiah 55, 8 and 9, which is something that we use a lot, but I used a different version this time because I just think it reads a little bit differently and might catch your mind. Same concept, same idea. Here's Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. The reason I didn't use it is because of how much we used it with the Anataris, the bridge called Higher.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want that association to come back, and so I used a different version. But it says this: "Indeed, my plans are not like your plans, and my deeds are not like your deeds, says the Lord. For just as the sky is higher than the earth, so my deeds are superior to your deeds, and my plans superior to your plans." Yeah. Cut the line to the lifeboat, let it drift away.
Yeah. And then you, speaking of using a different version, you did the same thing for number 3.
Yeah.
Let it run.
Let it run.
Bringing in the KJV, baby.
King James. And you want to know why this is in there? I mean, the King James version is in there because Danny Schlag pointed it out.
Oh, did he?
Yep, he sure did. He sent me a text about that scripture in King James version.
Let it run.
Yeah, and the KJV says, and we let her drive.
Let her drive. And so your big point is there, so often we try to hold control too tightly.
So cutting away the lifeboat represents surrendering our way.
Yeah.
Letting it run really reminds us of surrendering our will.
Ooh. So say that again.
Okay, so cutting away the lifeboat is our way. Letting it drive, letting it run is our will. Because it's our nature, big things, little things. We have this desire for control. We crave control. And we get anxious when things are out of our control. We fight for control, even though if we could really look at it, we'd know it's an illusion of control.
Yeah.
Yep. And kind of sometimes the bigger the deal is, the tighter we try to hold on to it. Yep. And of course, there's the scripture where Jesus said, "Try to hang on to your life, you're going to lose it. But if you give it up for my sake, then you'll truly gain it." And so there's really this spiritual lesson of submission and surrender that is a discipline that we need to evolve in our life, understanding that even when we think we're in complete control, we're really we have very little, if any.
Yeah, I'm excited. Trevor, we're looking at the summer series coming up next month, and Trevor's lesson is all about that, all about what we can control and what we can't. And most control is an illusion for us because there's so much anxiety, but he's going to look at what he's thinking right now is looking at the story of Esther and just how there were many, many things out of that in that story, out of those people's control. But then there's sometimes that, like, she wasn't in any control about being chosen to come into the palace, but then she had lots of choice when it came to bringing up what was being done to her people. And so that really where we can control and what we can't. And that's, I think that's a good lesson for us all in knowing that when we give up our life, that's when Jesus will take the ultimate control for us. And gosh, a good lesson for myself.
In the original version of this message.
Oh, OG?
The OG version.
Only on the TCW, the OG.
Right. Because if you read through this scripture, there are like at least 4 or more songs that are named in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so like right there, originally when I read through that Acts 27, like I had pauses in there to play like breaks of Jesus take the wheel and, you know, like praying for daylight. This, anyways, that got cut.
I don't know why.
That's weird. Seems like a can't miss idea.
I think there's certain times like if you were by yourself, there would be the lesson would look a little different than it does when it's packaged up the way it is. And the Holy Spirit does His will with it. I'm glad He does. Number 4, the ropes around the hall. Now, explain what that means.
Okay.
Because I don't think if you're not a seaman, you're not going to understand what it means to put ropes around the hall.
Okay. I'm just not mature enough for this. So, number 4, tie ropes around the hall. In the storm, they had this practice of wrapping the boat top to bottom in ropes.
Yes, ropes.
The whole way around. And basically, the principle here is these boats, the rougher the water gets, the more the boat's going to flex, the more nails are going to pop out, the more these weak spots in the boat are going to be revealed, right? And so the boat's going to be more likely to break apart. So they would wrap the entire boat in rope from front to back in order to strengthen the ship in the storm. And I don't know, I find it to be intriguing and really, I don't know what the word is here, but I mean, it connects with me that Scripture also says to do that, to bind God's word around your heart and your mind. You know, Deuteronomy 11:18, fix these words of mine in your hearts and on your minds, tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. But, you know, like wrapping the word of God around your life is going to strengthen your boat to help you make it through the storm.
Yeah, and I think that's something we have to remember. You play a lot. There's a lot of wordplay in this. Like you find a lot of for example, let it run and speak up and cut away. And I love that this one bind. It's the same thing with binding these words to our heart. Because when trouble comes, just like you talked about last week, we have to have the faith before the storm, so our faith can endure through the storm. And that's the same thing. You've heard of missionaries that have been captured by people that, because they had that word deep in their heart, that was something that kept them going through the heartache and through the long years of being in jail or imprisoned or stuff like that. I mean, and you have to think the same thing for Paul. I mean, when Paul was in prison, lonely, trying to figure out, okay, God has given me this mission. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, but here I am yet again. I would imagine, I don't know, Paul, he did so much. I would imagine there had to be times of not regret, but like questioning God in the fact that, is this the best use of me at this point? And I don't think in a pride way. Maybe it could be Paul. It's Paul, so there could be. But in a way of like, seriously, this is what you want right now for me? I could be doing this. I could be there. I could be encouraging this church physically at this place. But yet he's here in this jail cell. And I think the words that were still fresh from him, and this is a guy that knew his Old Testament.
Yeah.
It was the Testament for him. It was something old. I mean, it was old.
The regular Testament.
It wasn't a section 1 and a section 2 for him. But I mean, that had to enrich his heart. You know, songs of David that were talking about calling out to the Lord and hearing him in the midst of the highs and the lows. And when he was in his lowest points, these had to be theirs. And it's the same thing for you and I. And I think one thing that we've been doing lately at our house the last couple of years is when we're physically sick at home, we'll just play scripture on our phones. Even with the littles, and we'll put worship music on. I know you guys do that with worship music and
24/7 in the garage, baby.
Yeah, but there's a healing power to that, and because those are words that are edifying our God, that is the healer and is the God that brings about so many good things in our lives. So, buying the words.
Yeah. So I think just it's basically, I mean, this is kind of the same concept as like undergirding, or you know, I mean, like the same kind of deal. I mean, it's another layer that'll help you through.
Yeah, yeah. And then your last one was lighten the load.
Lighten the load.
And I think it was really good in the fact that you said there are certain things that you thought were necessary at the beginning of the trip that aren't necessary in the middle of a storm.
Yeah, isn't that
right?
so funny? Right? Yes. I mean, like all of a sudden you hit the waves, you hit the bad time.
I don't need this anymore.
And they're like, well, we don't need that. We don't need that. And because all of a sudden your priorities shift. You know, like now all of a sudden I'm trying to survive. And so there's things that your perspective on some things changes. And so with the priority of survival, you start to throw things overboard. And there are things that we carry through life that we think, need this. I've got to hold on to this. This is essential to my trip through life. But then the harder things get, the more we realize, man, this is not doing anything good for me. And so I think, you know, specifically that Ephesians 3 or that's Ephesians 4, 31, 32 talks about getting rid of bitterness and anger and rage and selfishness and all of those things. And I think that is godly instruction for us, as well as the parallel there of ditching some stuff to help you be able to navigate the rough waters better.
Yeah. Before we get to the spiritual, physical, are you a hoarder, John? You consider yourself a
Say
hoarder?
What?
Are you a hoarder? Do you hoard things? Do you keep things? Oh, I'll leave this.
I would consider more so than Sarah. Sarah would throw away something we just got.
I was going to say
if it was going to make a mess.
If it was John single by himself, probably things would stack up.
Yeah, I would say
but
so.
But Sarah purges frequently.
Right, sure.
Maria's
unless
the
it's
same
a
way.
Christmas decoration.
Yeah, I have to keep
I've
that.
Got 15
trees,
totes,
literally.
Yeah,
but that I think about that because my parents, God love him. My parents'
that's nice of you to
basement, parents' basement is full of stuff.
Yeah,
and my mom has spent even since my dad has died, since the last 7 years, purging and getting rid of stuff, and there's just and it is true, like you said. There, I mean, on the physical side, there's so many things that we think we need to keep. Look at this thing that's going to bring up this memory. But again, you never look at it again. It's going to be in a box that's picking up space in your attic, and then you haul it from one house to the next. And
what's that Marie Kondo or whatever?
Yeah,
like, like if you haven't used it in X amount of time, then you don't need it.
Yeah, or if you can get it, I don't think it was her, but if you can get it for under $10 or within 10 minutes, you should get rid of it.
Is there anything more American?
Oh yeah.
Then
Storage
like not only do I have everything I need, but I'm going to pay extra money to store all this stuff that I never use.
It's crazy. And our own Randy, what's Randy's last name?
Poston,
thank you.
Yeah.
Randy Poston. I mean, he says it's good. There's good money in storage.
I'm sure there is.
And if you need a storage unit, and you've had storage units before, we're not talking about you.
No.
We're just talking about the people that have a lot of stuff. But I can't imagine a person from a third world country saying, "Oh, this isn't where I live. This is just a garage that I pay for that I put stuff that I don't use." And let's talk about the spiritual. There are so many things that we think that we have to that hold importance in our lives, but when it comes down to it, when it comes to the periods of where we just have to survive and we have to only hold on to what we know with God, those other things just seem to not be important anymore.
And a lot of times we're holding on to things that are not doing us any good in the first place, but we're able to manage in the good seasons. But then all of a sudden the rough waters come and it really makes those things stand out as weighing us down more than helping us through.
Because you're only needing the things in the storm that are going to get you through. And the only things that are getting you through are...
Strip it down to the essentials.
It's a good lesson, John.
Well... Praise the Lord. I appreciate that, Jared.
Good lesson. Paul aboard. Have you ever been on a cruise line?
I have not. Never gone on a cruise. And
Really?
I highly doubt that I ever will because Sarah just does not have any desire.
I have a lot of desire. I even want to do the river cruises. I think that would be sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're in the middle of the city rather than just being out in the ocean, which I can find a little boring in my opinion. But I love hotels.
Yeah.
And I love resorts.
Okay.
I haven't been to very many resorts. But I just think the concept of a cruise line, and Maria's the whole trapped on a thing, and there's that. So if you love cruises, people listening, text Jared at centralnow.com and let us know if you're an avid cruise liner. And it's crazy. I mean, this is kind of a sad thing that we're talking about this podcast the same week about the Titanic. Go there. Yeah. You know, I had to go somewhere, but it's just incredibly sad that that happened, and the submarine, and it was just sad all around. Yeah. But it is just, again, and it's just weird that something bad happened on or around something that was with the Titanic, that something was really, a
disaster happened when they went to look at a disaster.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's just, it was just crazy that happened the same week that we're in our boat series.
Here we are.
But here we are. Now, here's where we're going to go. Okay. We're going to bring in Heather. It's very crazy because we usually have the guest come in before we talk.
Yeah.
She's coming in like literally right after we're done here.
Oh, really?
We're going to just press pause and hit play again and hit record, and then she's going to tell her story.
Oh, nice.
Again, super good lessons, and that's what I've so been appreciative of the last couple weeks, bringing in some guests in, around, and through the Central family to tell their stories. Yeah. Like I said in communion or in service last week, it builds your faith to hear other people learn these lessons and help with these lessons, and that's the whole point of why we do this podcast.
Overcame by the blood of the Lamb and
the testimony.
The word of their testimony. Yeah.
Words. Really good with those words.
Right here,
I know what it is. Oh. It's orange vanilla. I'm a big... Now, speaking of orange vanilla. Did we talk about this last week? No, we haven't. I finally got the taste of the custard stand. We went on Monday. We went to the custard stand in Cesar.
And?
It was so good. I'm a fruity guy.
Is this what the orange made you think of?
Well, that's what it made me think of. The orange twist, the American Dream cone. Plus, I'm going to get one of those shirts. Those are cool with the...
I think it's just Dream, right? American Dream Cone is the Stephen Colbert Ben & Jerry's.
That's it. Yeah. Right. And that is my favorite ice cream that I can buy. But yeah, there you go. So that's it. That's okay. Let's get to Heather. Good with these transitions. We'll see you right back after this with our conversation with Heather. And we're back with the Central Weekly, and we have a very special guest in the podcast studio, the podcast backstage studio. We have one and only Heather Luttinen. Heather, say hi.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Heather, first question. Are you nervous?
Yes.
Are you excited?
I'm always excited to be here.
Are you prepared?
Medium. It depends what you ask.
She has a full notebook, ladies and gentlemen.
I've got my notes.
Full of notes. And here's what's going to be cool. We've brought in guests the last couple weeks to tell their stories of how they've seen God work in their lives, in their past and in their future. Not in the future, we don't know that, but in their present, and see how God has moved. And it's been really neat to hear these life lessons. Now, I know that God has seen you through a whole lot. Mm-hmm. It was funny. We did Rooted together. Actually, maybe not Rooted. It was the second one, mm-hmm. which I can't think of it at Life and Rhythm.
Yes.
And I remember we had the Carters in that group. Who else was in that group?
It was just you guys, us, and the Carters.
And I remember hearing your story over the Carters' delicious brownies. They had with the caramel. It's the best way to have brownies, in my opinion. Are you a middle brownie person or a corner?
I'm a corner. Okay. Corner person.
That says a lot about you.
Yeah.
Okay. But basically, I got to hear your story. And to be all honest, we'd say, hey, in the next 10 minutes, tell your story. Your story took an hour and a half. Mm-hmm. But I loved every minute of it because it was just this passionate plea of, hey, I was in a rough spot. God showed up and he saw me, and this is where I'm at. Now, we're going to tell a little bit of those stories because really we're going to center on our conversation on the storms and how God has seen you through and lessons that you've learned in the storms that you've gone through. So I know that your husband, Andy, is a very special guy, and maybe we'll bring you back and we'll just have like an Andy and me, maybe not even bring him, but just you, and you could talk about you guys. I don't know. We'll see. But so this might be part one of Heather Luttinen. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Because again, this is the Central Weekly. You've said you're an avid listener to the Praise podcast. Yes. That's exciting. We're all part of one family. But yeah, they like to go super long on their episodes.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, I bet we've had 69 episodes. This is episode 69. They've had half of that probably. But yet, when you talk of quantity, it's probably the same.
Yeah.
Because they go about double we go. So
I know. So I had to apologize to Jared because I'm like, all right, I am very familiar with Eric and Brooks' podcasts. I've listened to like all of those. But only a couple of the weeklies.
Only a couple of weeklies. That's okay.
And some of Maria's also.
Yeah, we wish she would do more podcasts, but the capacity's just not there.
Yeah.
And she wants to include Hope, and Hope's just not, she doesn't have the capacity either. So, but this is about you and how God has worked through you and your family, Heather. Now, Heather, give us a little thing. You live here in Mount Vernon.
Yes.
And you own a spa here in Mount Vernon.
It's like a small, I don't even call it a spa. It's just
spa-ish.
like a little studio. Kind of, because
okay.
it's just me there. And yeah, so I do massages and facials there.
That sounds delightful. Husband is Andy.
Yes.
And 2 kids.
Gabe and Bailey.
Now, how old's Gabe now?
So Gabe is 18. So
is
he just graduated.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then Bailey's 10.
He's 10. And she's sitting out in the green room.
Yeah.
Not listening to us.
Eating
She's
all
probably
the chips.
eating all the chips in the green room. And so 2 kids, and you live here in Mount Vernon. Now, you grew up in Mount Vernon?
So kind of, yeah. My parents moved here from Northern Illinois when I was going into junior high. So I was new at that point, but yeah, went to junior high and high school, went to Run Lake here.
Oh, yeah.
Then moved away for several years, but then married Andy, who's also from here. And so we moved back here in 2014.
Okay. Yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. So where do you want to go first, Heather Luttinen?
Well, okay, maybe just how we first came to Central.
Okay.
That's an obvious place, right?
Because, I mean, being around Mount Vernon for a while, you knew of Central.
Yes.
So, yeah, what brought you into the Central family?
So it's funny. I remember before we actually moved here, we were talking about the things we were looking forward to in Mount Vernon and what we thought had changed or improved, which was like, oh, there's a new high school building and there's a new hospital. And we heard that Central is just like blasting off. Like this is what we heard at the time.
What year is
Living
this?
6 years away, 2014.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We didn't even know very many people who went here. We knew a few people from our previous churches when we were kids who we knew attended here, but nobody really like close to us. So when we first came here, I was like, I want to visit every single church in town because I like to have options. And
We are a person of the 21st century.
and go from there. But Andy, his dad was a pastor at the Lutheran church years ago.
Yes.
And then my family, we went to Logan Street Baptist Church here also. But we wanted to check everything out, but we never really got that far. We visited Central and then just kind of kept coming back. A friend of mine, this is how we actually decided to come here first, though. A friend of mine showed me the video of John singing, I Find You, I Need Thee.
Oh, I see. I forgot about that.
That's the best. That's the best.
That is, I mean, it's so funny because that's already been one of like the bedtime songs.
Yeah.
That before we knew of John and that. And I remember him singing that at the Du Quoin State Fair. He did that one year. Oh gosh, it is
Super
and he does it
moving.
on keys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's super good.
So a friend of mine, when we first got here, we were in her car, and I just remember she showed me the YouTube video of John singing that song, and I was like, wow, like there's somebody in Mount Vernon that can sing like that, that can play like that. And so she's like, yeah, that's at Central Christian Church. And I'm like, okay, well, that's where we're going to go.
Yeah.
So I loved the music. Andy really liked Jamie's sermons, which I did too. But I mean, at the time, that was like
But that
the
played
camps we were in. Like,
yeah.
this is what I love. This is what I love. And
because
then,
music's always played a big part for you, right?
yeah, for sure. But then probably one of the biggest reasons also why we continued to keep coming was like the kids programs, you know, because at this point we've had one in all the stuff, Ignite, Fusion, all of the stages. So that's definitely something that like.
And I think you're not alone in a lot of what you said. I think the music and just the community that you get instantly when you walk in the worship center is something that's going to attract initially a lot of people. And then I think what keeps people coming is the kids and how the kids could get plugged in. And I think that's just such a big deal that families can come together at a church family, but also they're learning so much at their own level and uniquely in their own way. And again, it's something you guys can really build upon those foundations in the family.
Well, and so I will say, I just wanted to touch on this because I've heard other people, like I'm out in the community a lot, you know?
Yeah.
So I told Eric this one time, I think, like you guys are around each other, like the staff, we have a large staff here and you guys are around each other working every day and stuff. But I was like, listen, I'm in the community every day. Like I hear what other people say who either don't go to Central or they're the people in the pews, you know, and like, I want to fill you in so we can just have our ear to that. And I know you guys do in tons of ways, but one of the things that, you know, sometimes people say is like, oh, it's so big. It's so big. It's hard to feel like really like connected. So I just wanted to say, like, I felt that way.
Yeah.
For like a little while when we were like regular visitors. So So, I mean, honestly, one morning I was kind of like complaining about it. Like, I'm just not getting that like church home feeling. We grew up in tiny churches, like when we were young, potlucks every Sunday, that whole thing. And actually, so Andy said to me, like, you know what? I think that might be our fault. Like, we're just showing up on Sundays and that's it. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, probably. And so we decided to join a small group, which was that small group we were in with you guys and with Callie and Nate, which was kind of intimidating at first because we showed up and I'm like, everybody else here, I'm pretty sure went to Bible college. Like, I'm not saying a word.
And
but
Nate's,
it ended up being amazing.
Did worship leading, at his other church. And, so he's got some experience there. He grew up in the church. I mean, and I think, and I could sense that first couple of weeks from you guys. You're like, you were there. And you were, all in, but it was just like, I kind of want to observe this a little bit first. I'm a little timid would be the word I would say.
Yeah. Like, how real can I get
but I think,
in this situation?
And to back you up a little bit, it is amazing. And I never want to sound harsh, but I think a lot of times when people say that Central's too big, it's their own fault. I hate to say that, but I started back when we started in 2010, the getting lost in the crowd it is a real thing if you let it. And we actually wanted that. That was the thing that we wanted because we were coming back from a bad church experience. We were just roughed up and we wanted a place where we can worship, experience that worship, feel the presence of God, but not have to do a lot of stuff and not have to really work with people a lot. So we went in the way back, we sang and it was great. And then we got involved by serving. Then we got in a small group. And again, I think my question would just be, would people feel the same way and say that same thing about Central if they're involved? And I don't think they would.
Right. Well, and that's just kind of why I wanted to say that because I feel completely differently now, obviously. Yeah. But sometimes that's like all it takes is just that one step, just that one thing. And then from there, ended up getting involved with worship team and then meeting so many awesome people there. Yeah. And so, just taking that one step, but just wanted to say, like, I understand that feeling and it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe there's some things that, people can do themselves to help because.
And you're a family that has seen, the kids have seen all, like you said, all the age levels. Now that Gabe has gone through the whole thing. What, for the side note, what's it feel like to have an 18-year-old graduate from college or graduate from high school?
It feels like the worst, longest breakup ever in a
Where's
weird way.
Is he going somewhere?
He's going to SIU at Edwardsville.
Okay, so not too far.
No, but that's actually perfect.
Is he going to stay on campus?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So I don't know. Some days I'm just like really actually very excited for him. And other days I'm like, oh, this is crazy.
Yeah. I can't imagine. That's one thing I'm just like, I don't understand. And it's like, it's funny because I'm 36 now. And I don't know. I was sitting in the bathroom the other day and I was like, 36, I mean, almost 40. And but it's weird for me too, because my parents, I don't know about you, but my parents were a little older when I came into the picture. My dad was 40 when I was born. My mom was like 35, 36. Okay. So my parents in the high school years, when you're starting to realize your parents and their ages, my dad, white hair at that time because he had white hair a little earlier. But anyways, that was just things. So when I'm thinking of like in your 40s, having a high schooler graduate from high school, that's just mind blowing to me. And Lord willing, all the time that you have left. And then grandkids and all that. That's just...
Well, it's weird because when Gabe was born, obviously we had him very early. And so at that time, I definitely felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb, And then there were those middle years where we just kind of blended in there, where he was like middle school. No one could really tell, are we 5 years older, 5 years younger than what they think that, But now that they're like, what? You have an 18-year-old? Now it's kind of going back to, you shouldn't be in this spot.
Oh, gosh. I would make that mistake because I used to work at the hospital. You get to run errands for people. So I was always interacting with the nurses. And it's funny that I'm going to do a sermon in a couple weeks about keeping your mouth closed because I would always open my mouth.
Gosh.
And I was always trying to give compliments. So one thing that I would always say to the nurses, they would say something about, oh, my grandkid, is having their first birthday. And I would always say, girl, you're way too young to have, and this is a compliment, way too young to have a grandchild. No, you can't be. And then they go, well, I got pregnant
And they
when I
feel
was
like they have to tell
15.
you their story.
And I was like, I didn't want to know this, and I'm sorry, and I was just trying to give you a compliment. So, yeah, life stages with kids. Big
well,
thing.
I will be there. What weekend are you doing this sermon on keeping your mouth shut?
2 weeks.
Okay, I'll be there.
Yeah, close your mouth and listen. That's what we're going with. We're looking at practical life lessons. I'm looking at James. James was just, that book, it's just too practical to ignore, especially when we're talking about summer school. So okay, next storm. What are you willing to talk about next? Give us the direction. Let's steer the ship into that direction now.
So I guess, I was thinking like, we're going to talk about the sermon from last week, but I realize it's very close to, church is tonight since it's Friday. But I had a couple thoughts about that. So I'm liking this series. Andy and I have both talked about this also after church the last 2 weeks because they're Bible stories that everybody knows.
Yeah.
Like if you've ever gone to church, you know the story.
You know Noah, you know
Jonah
Jonah.
and the whale and Noah and Jesus walking on the water. You know these. But I like how John can still somehow like dissect them and you can still learn something new or see something from a different point of view that you never
you're gonna love this
ever
week.
looked at.
Yeah.
I'm loving that. Okay, first I do want to say something though, and people think this is really weird. My mom does not like this about me. Peter, he is my favorite disciple.
I agree.
Like hands down. You agree with this?
Well, I think we're attracted to the guy that puts his foot in his mouth and learns a lesson from it. I think we can agree on that.
Okay, that is part of it.
Yeah.
That is part of it. So I've always felt this way. And just these last 2 years, I guess I've like done a little more research on why do I feel this way. So we talked about Peter last week. A couple things I wanted to say. If you Google like what kind of personality did Peter have, Peter the disciple, what did he have? You're going to come across the negative things first. Like he had a quick temper, he was irritable, maybe drank too much, he was impulsive, loudmouthed, like it literally said loudmouth. You see all of those things. But I don't know if you remember, you know how sometimes people will write books like The Three Little Pigs from the view of the big bad wolf.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anytime I hear about Peter, that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm like seeing it from his view. So when I look at him, I see him more as like, yes, all of these human characteristics that were probably flaws. But also like I see him being really bold. And so while we talked about the story where the disciples were out on the boat and then Jesus came and was walking towards them, and we talked about how they were scared at first and they didn't know if it was a ghost or what. When I read this, though, and I forget what version it was in, the part where Peter is like, Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you.
Yeah.
I feel like the version I read it in was just him saying like, Lord, is that you? Or Lord, is that really you? So just to stop right there, I feel like while all the disciples, they had no idea who this person was, I feel like Peter at least thought this could be my Jesus walking on the water towards us, So there's that. And then when Jesus says, come, I think it's really easy for all of us to judge all the Bible characters and all the ways that they mess up, right? But like how many of us, even with Jesus being right there saying, come on, how many of us would have had just the faith that it took to like throw your legs over the boat, climb down the side, and then take that step actually into the waters? Like, let's give Peter some credit there, you know? Because yes, while he, just that like human fear got to him and he noticed the waves and the wind and everything and he looked down and he was scared. I feel like we focus on that a lot. John didn't focus on that last week, but I feel like a lot of times in the story, we focus on that part like, oh, Peter, he didn't have enough faith. And I'm like, well, can we focus on the fact of like the faith it took just for him to get out of the boat? You didn't see any of the other disciples who even thought about that, And then the part towards the end of Jesus's life where he had already been taken, and it says, I think it says all the disciples fled except for John. Maybe I think John was with Jesus's mother. But, and of course they would be scared, But it does talk about how Peter followed at a distance. So yeah, maybe he wasn't right there, but he still was following along. And I just always kind of see him like wanting to just stay close to Jesus. And even like, he must have been close enough because it talks about how the third time after he denied him and then the rooster crowed, that next verse says that Jesus turned and looked at him.
Yeah, he would have been right there.
You know? And so just after all the parables, you always see Peter coming back and asking Jesus questions. And I don't see that in like a doubtful way. I see it as him like always wanting to know more, learn more, and wanting to just like spend that one-on-one time with him. So anyway, maybe I'm just relatable to Peter because all his flaws, I'm like, okay, I get it, but also look at like he was like one of Jesus's right hand men. You know?
I got on my phone because I had to write that down. That's super good because a lot of times, I mean, kind of talking about thinking because I'm in sermon mode right now.
Yeah.
Preparing for that, and Peter was one of the first guys that came to mind on what not to do. Keeping your mouth closed and listening probably wasn't his first thing. But and I think you're right. When you are that type of person, a lot of times people will see those negative qualities of you first. But do you take the time to listen and to lean in and not go anywhere? Like Peter, he didn't go anywhere. He let his he didn't let his questioning overwhelm him. Just like he got out of the boat. You look at Judas, he let his questioning and his doubts and his fears get the most of him, and it led to his complete downfall. But Peter was able to be rebuilt because he stayed close enough to the Father. And so that's an encouraging word for all of us, that even when life gets hard, even when you did show faith, but yet you're not showing faith right now, don't let that overwhelm you. Because that's going to happen in our lives. Our lives are full of peaks and valleys. Our lives are full of getting out of the boat and then looking around and noticing the waves and feeling overcome with fear. Our lives are full of that. But if you're like Peter and you stay close enough to the Father, you're there for the redemptive story that God's going to have for all of us. And he had that for Peter because Peter built the church up. I mean, he was the leader in the first church. So that's a big thing. I'm glad you brought that up. And I hope that a lot of people, even this week when we're looking at Paul's, being shipwrecked and all the things that happened with that shipwreck, Paul still was led to the purpose that he needed to because he stayed close to the Father.
Well, and I know John has talked about this, I think a couple of times this year, but he's talked about how, just how it is so important to like already have that relationship with Jesus because like before the storm comes, and anytime any of us are going through a storm, like we're all like, yep, like God, we are here. Like we're going to depend on you. We're talking to you. We're at the steps. We're praying. But why it is so important to have that relationship before those storms. And I know that, I've experienced that where like, for me, the reason why I think it's so important is because so that when you are in the storm and everything is crazy and loud and whatever, that you're able to decipher like what is actually God's voice, what's really from him, when you're asking those desperate prayers and plead, so that you can really hear him. Yeah.
You got to know his voice. And I think that's something that's been so prevalent for me, because we're going to hear a lot of voices and they're probably going to get a lot louder when things get harder. You're going to hear a lot of lies about yourself in those storms. And you're going to hear a lot of lies and those are all perpetrated from the devil himself, because he's the father of lies and he's trying to get you away from keeping your eyes on him. So that's a good thing. And that's the thing why we have to stay in our word. We have to have communication with him. Our prayer time and our time with him can't be all us talking. It has to be us listening. And that's another thing I'm going to write down. You keep going.
You write that down for your sermon.
Okay.
That's very true, though. It's very true. And actually, one of your podcasts that I did listen to, I think it was Shauna that was on there that talked about that too, kind of learning to listen more. Yep. And I was like,
yeah, she's done. And now when trouble does come, she knows his voice better than she knows the lies in that voice. And then you could say, no, that's not a lie. Big thing that I've learned with anxiety and kind of guiding through that in my own life is so many, and I don't do it enough, but writing down, okay, here's my lie that I'm hearing. Here's the Bible truth that I need to remember, because that's the truth. Maria gave me a little handout flyer that was spiritual ammo, because when that wartime does come, here's the spiritual ammo that you can use against that. And I think that's something we have to remember. And it's so good. That's a good point. Good stuff.
That. Spiritual ammo.
Spiritual ammo.
I like that. Well, and just one last point on that is like, I think sometimes, like especially as Christians, that it can be really frustrating when you are in the middle of the storm, knowing that God is all powerful, knowing that he could calm it right then and there. He could change it. Yep. It's almost like that can be more frustrating knowing that sometimes, because then sometimes you're like, God, hello. Yeah. Do you see me? But knowing that, I think that when Christians are smack dab in the middle of a storm, sometimes it can be really hard, and there can be anger and doubt. And like you said, the enemy loves to use that time to bring in the lies and the questions. And does God even see you? Are you important enough? Does he even care about this? But yeah, I mean, those are all lies. Something that Hope shared with me a couple years ago. And it wasn't even a big storm. It was like a medium storm, but she was like,
little southwesterly gale.
Just fix your eyes. She's like, just keep looking back, looking back to Jesus. Just fix your eyes. And I like that too, from the story from last week, or the sermon from last week about, while Peter looked down, Jesus was still looking at him, just like waiting for him to look up and be like, here I am, like, help me, But just that was a good reminder of like, Jesus is still there. Sometimes we get busy, walk away, preoccupy ourselves, whatever. But like, he is still always there. But yeah, so when the enemy's piling on with these lies, when you are in the middle of a storm and the enemy's like, you know, God could do this, he could fix this for you. Why isn't he doing it? Like I have felt that way in the past, but I think you just have to, during those times, you just have to really, like you said, stay close, and hold on tight to Jesus. Because every time that I found myself in that place, while it was hard and probably felt terrible, and I was wondering, God, when are you going to step in? When are you going to do, what I know you could do? I can look back now on the other side of things and see what he was doing. And we talked about that. John talked about it last week about in the storm, God is still always working. We might not be able to see it at the time. But I do feel like it is usually after, like when everything's calmed down, when the storm has ended, that you're able to look back and say, like, you were right there.
Yeah. And I think that's faith. I mean, that's faith in sticking in that storm, but yet knowing that he is doing something greater. And like John said, I mean, he put him in the storm and he puts us in. That sounds bad to say. He never leads us astray, but he allows those storms to happen because he knows they're going to deepen our faith. And gosh, going back a little bit about what you said, that's been a big thing for me because I've never doubted him. I've doubted that he cares. Because it's like, okay, this storm is a lot more than I thought it was going to be. And I know you could do something about it. And again, I talk about The Chosen all the time. But you probably, if you haven't, I don't think you have.
I haven't watched all of The Chosen.
So you're going to love because the season 3 is really, Peter's main story is just weaved through all season 3.
Oh, awesome.
Season 3. And he, at the very end, he never doubts. He's the guy that knows that God is the God. He's seen these miracles, he's seen these healings, but because of his own story and God not showing up to heal in his own story, that's when he gets angry. And he's ready to get out of the boat because Jesus told him to get out of the boat. I have the faith to get out of the boat, but then I'm going to look around a little bit because this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be, or you're not healing, you're not doing the way I thought it was going to be. So, I mean, that's a real reality.
Well, and
me.
you know this with all the foster care work you guys did, and then with the adoption and everything. Like, I think especially in areas where you feel like God called you there, or you feel like you were following what think you heard from him, and you're like, all right, let's go, like I'm there, and then it's not as easy as you think, or there's a lot of roadblocks and you start to question, like, did I hear right? And a lot of times I think, yeah, you did, but that doesn't mean that everything's just going to be roses and sunshine.
This is way too much of me, Heather, but it's it's crazy. Gosh.
I just know that you know that.
Because it's crazy because, I mean, the foster care journey that was, and marriage is another thing. I knew it was going to be difficult, but I didn't know it was going to be this difficult.
Did we though?
You're like, and it's funny because when your parents are trying to tell you, hey, this is, are you need to be ready for this. Yeah. And you're like, okay, whatever, I'm in love. But it's just like, there's a whole lot I can go here, but it's just so much though that we have to be ready with the Savior. And those storms, and again, I question him, but I know that he's doing these for the betterment of me. That's the reason I'm married to Maria LaCrone. It's for the best, for me to become the best person and the best version of what I can be. And that's why I don't ever want to say no to those moments. And I think the same to you. It's just such a blessing that we can look back and see, okay, this is where God showed up. Yeah. And I'm just grateful for that. We have those memories that we could do that. Mm-hmm. So enough about me, please.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Well, you want to talk about kept for just a second?
Let's do it.
So, I mean, at some point, this is what I think Maria should do at some point. Mm-hmm. She should have a kept gathering where it's just random. Mm-hmm. People can just randomly go up there on the stage and tell what God has done in their life through the kept ministry. Mm-hmm. Because I think she probably hasn't even heard half of what has happened through that.
What's yours?
Oh my gosh. Like just with me, and I'm just one person, like I'm one little person here in Mount Vernon. Just with me, there are several powerful things that have happened at Kept. Well, I don't see any Kleenexes around.
Oh, so. Sorry. Those didn't get brought into the new office, the new studio.
So let me think, just the major one, which Maria does know about this, but probably not very many other people. Partially because I think, all right, I'll tell you why in a second. Okay. I haven't shared this with very many people because I don't want to give other people this, this like high expectation or something of, oh, that sounds bad. Okay, going to the steps.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Something is very scary for a lot of people.
Yes.
Most people, I think. So I have kept this to myself kind of because I didn't want other people to think, hey, you go to the steps and you're going to see miracles, because you might, but it might not be time for that, for that miracle yet, you know?
Yeah.
But I'm going to tell it anyways. Okay. So one of the kept evenings, I think it was an evening that we did it. Honestly, right now, I don't even remember very much else about it. All I know was like at the time, I didn't even really want to be there that night just because I was in a bad mood and I was kind of like frustrated with God about some things at the time. But there was a song, Annie sang it, and it's the song, it's the Stripes song. By your stripes I am healed. And there's that part where she just gets it. And oh my gosh. So anyways, there was something for a while. Like I had been feeling like God really wanted me to like hand over to him. And I was like holding on tight to it for dear life. Like, no, like I'm going to control this. I'm going to, figure out this. But I'd been feeling like he really wanted me to give it to him, like for real, give it to him, like lay it at his feet and be like, all right, this is yours now. I'm not going to carry this anymore. I'm not going to hold on to this anymore. Because I knew it was getting in the way of, well, honestly, it was getting in the way of my marriage moving forward at the time. So, I mean, I didn't even mean to say that out loud, but no, that's fine. It's okay. I mean, we've been married for more than 10 years. If you've been married for more than that, you're going to have struggles and ups and downs, and we've had both. So, okay. So anyways, this was my experience in the moment. So Annie's belting this song and I'm feeling it like, okay, God, all right. And there was even a moment I was like, I don't need to go up there. He can see me. He can see me right here. Why do I have to? I'm sitting 2 rows deep. Do I really need to walk 10 more feet? Like, why? Yep. But I just felt the Holy Spirit be like, if you don't go up there, if you don't give this to me right now, you might not ever do it. Which was kind of weird. But so anyway, so in my experience at the time, I went up, I was praying like, all right, God, this is all yours, and I remember like I was kneeling down and I felt somebody come up beside me to the left of me, and I felt somebody come up to the right of me and somebody behind me. And then I felt like somebody, like my eyes were closed, but I felt somebody like kneel down and touch my forehead. And it was weird because I thought it was Brooke for some reason, but yet she was probably singing. So anyways, I kind of, I'm down like close to the ground. And so I did open my eyes for just a second, honestly, because I'm super claustrophobic and I could feel the heat of like all these people. And I was like, man, I don't even know that many people here. It's really cool that so many people came up to the steps to like surround me and pray for me. And I'm thinking like, who could that even be? So I remember like my eyes are towards the ground and they were closed when I opened them for a second, and I just saw feet like all around me. And so for a moment, I thought, man, Lee being barefoot on the stage is really catching on.
Everybody's doing it now.
Like everyone's taking their shoes off. I didn't really think that much else about it except, yes, I'm claustrophobic. I hope they all go sit down soon so I can go get back in my seat. Night gets over. I go home. I tell Andy, like, man, tonight was an awesome experience. I feel like I really had to break through some things. This is what happened. And oh my gosh, all these people came up and prayed for me. And so then the next day, Bailey wanted to watch it. Oh. It was one of them that like kids could have come, which I love that. But sometimes I just need to focus and it's easier without kids. So Bailey was like, well, let's watch it. So I said, okay. So we're watching the whole kept thing and it's going along. It's getting towards the end. Andy's singing the song. She gets to the part. She's belting it out. I see myself on the screen. I'm sitting there in my living room. I see myself go down front. And then I see two people, Katie Bond and Lucas Crawford's wife, Amara, come up and they're praying with me. A couple of minutes go by and that's it. So we get done. We finish watching it. I go in the bathroom. The bathroom's like my secret place, right? I go in the bathroom. I like slide down the wall. I'm sitting on the floor and I'm just like losing it because my experience was the night before was of being surrounded. So I'm like, whose feet did I even see? Like, what was that, you know? And the only explanation I could think of was like, it had to be angels, right? Just coming around, and which made me, after seeing it and then knowing what I saw the night before, it just was like overwhelming. I texted Amara and was just like, you must bring the army of God with you when you go to pray with somebody, because this was my experience. And you know, I've gone to the steps other times also. And one thing I want to say is like, it doesn't always have to be a terrible time in your life. There's so many times that I'm like, we hear the sermon and then there's songs and things are moving and you feel it in your heart. You feel things working and moving. And I do feel like we've had like a really good response for a long time. But still there are those times when like maybe there's 1-2 people who trickle up there. And I'm like, okay, we all have things in our lives that we could be praying for or that we're struggling with or that we want to be different or we need to talk to God about. We do all have that. Okay, now some of us, maybe we don't think it's big enough to go to the steps for. But even if we're going through a season where we don't have the big, bad, scary things going on, like we should all be there like with a grateful heart and a thankful heart, you know? So that's something I just want people to know, because there's been times I go up there and I'm just grateful. Like even there was a Thursday night, which that's become my new favorite thing, by the way, the first Thursdays. They're just so chill. I love them.
Yeah, I'm excited about how God's moving through those first Thursdays. Brooke and Eric really felt a call to actually slightly change the name just for July and called it Freedom Thursday. And talk about the freedom that we have in Christ and the abundance that we have, the ability to be overwhelmed by with God. And again, I love it too, because it's a lot less corporate, but just structured, I think. And I think God can play a big role in both. But I think there are a lot of people that are yearning for just a little something different, a little something more. And it opens the idea they're going to have more testimonies. And again, you know, John talks about it, you know, Eric talks about it, but there's, and the Bible talks about it, but there's power in our testimonies. And that's why I think it's powerful to do this Central Weekly on just a small scale. And we might have thousands of people listening, but again, hearing your testimony about how you felt and you were surrounded, even when just 2 people were there, and how God shows up when you're obedient to him, even in the storms. But yeah, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for what he's doing. I'm grateful for this church family and good stuff. Good stuff, Heather. We're going to take a little bit of a break.
Okay.
I hate this again. This can be part 1. But we'll take a little break. We'll ask you the question then again, how has God been working in your life lately? Because I know he's been teaching you a lot of lessons, but let's talk about now. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll find some tissues and we'll be right back. And we're back with our conversation with our guest, Heather Luttinen. We got our tissues. We're good to go for round 2. Ding, ding, ding. Heather, the question we ask all of our guests on the Central Weekly, and you are not going to miss out on it. So here it is. How has God been working in your life lately?
So do you want the
Is this page 3?
the easy response? No, this one I don't have tons of notes for, but do you want the easy response that came to me right away, or you want like
both?
One I had to search for
Both.
Okay. So honestly, I knew you were going to ask this question.
I did. Yeah, I told you. And you're such an avid listener. You knew it was coming.
This was almost a deterrent for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I woke up this morning like, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
Because of this question.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was feeling bad about that because I'm like, girl, you have a lot of things that you could say. There's like tons of ways that you should be saying you recognize God in your life right now or be grateful about. And there are a lot of those things, the obvious things. My kids are healthy. God provided some really awesome just avenues for Gabe to have his college paid for.
Yeah,
that's big.
Mm-hmm.
My business is good. Like there's a lot of really good things. Okay. But that's kind of generic. Yeah. Right.
That's the easy one.
I mean, we expect God to do those things, I guess, you know, not that he has to, but I think we take those easy things for granted sometimes. Mm-hmm. So I was talking to Andy about it last night. Like, I'm just not even sure what to say there because I don't have this big, I didn't just go to Mexico and feed the orphans or adopt anybody or, I don't have this giant, grandiose thing where I feel like God's working in my life right now. But yet I know he is. So last night, Andy's like, well, what would you say, like, if it was just you and Jared talking, what would you say? So I was like, well, if it was just me, my friend Jared, no podcast, I would probably tell him, like, honestly, I'm not sure because recently I've just felt like my spirit has been just kind of tired. Makes sense? And not even for any big specific reason. Like it's hard to pinpoint even why, because there's a lot of good going on. There's also some hard stuff going on. You wouldn't even think this is a big deal maybe, but like my dog is dying.
Oh man, no, seriously.
He's so old and we have a couple dogs, but he's my favorite.
Yeah. That's a big deal.
It's not a huge thing, but it's a thing. He's literally on his last leg.
Yeah.
But aside from my dog, there's two of my other favorite people in the world are towards the end of their life. And it's okay. It's expected. It's been coming, but it's just hard still to watch and walk through. So that's what I was telling Andy last night. Like, I probably would just tell him, like, I don't even know if I should do this because I've just been feeling like my spirit is tired. I don't even know why. So this morning I woke up and he was already gone for work, so he leaves pretty early. I'm like, oh, okay, it's just me and my thoughts here. I'm like, hello, ask Jesus, what do you want me to say? I have all these things floating around in my mind, like, talk to Jesus. So I just kind of asked him, like, Lord, first of all, I feel bad that I can't just rattle off all these things that I should be rattling off probably. Because there's things even right now that I am still like waiting on to see what he's going to do and some answers. And like, hey, God, remember we had this conversation last week and the week before and the week before, still here. But here's what I heard back from the Holy Spirit. And there's times like this when I feel like he speaks really clearly to me and it's always really simple. But he said, when I'm like, what do you want me to tell people? This is supposed to be encouraging, supposed to be positive, but I can't lie and I gotta be real and genuine. And so he said that I am constant. And so I was thinking about that. And that also just really goes back to like the sermon from last week that, just like we mentioned earlier, he is always constant. Like he was still there. Peter looked down. Jesus is still there with his hand out like, I got you, But that's such a simple thing. Like I am constant. But that is something that I do know is true and is genuine. even and especially when you're waiting for certain things. But then I just started thinking about the song that we sing a lot, The Blessing. Okay. And everybody always laughs when you say the title because they're thinking like The Blessing from
always.
the Christmas Vacation. Every time you say it, people laugh. But if you just read the lyrics to this song, and maybe even sometimes when we sing it, people might think it's redundant, right? Because it talks about in your weeping and rejoicing, I am for you, 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 right? But anytime we sing that song, I feel like it gets more and more powerful with each sentence, even though it's saying the same thing. Because what it's saying is, I am for you. I am for you. Like, I am for you. I am for you. Like, every time it just seems to be like, do you hear me? You know, like just this very strong reminder. And how many of us would be encouraged on any given day to have anyone in our life just be like, hey, I'm for you. I support you. I'm on your side. I got you, you know. But to know that God, like the God of the universe, is saying that and always feels that way, even in the unknown and all of that, that is reassuring. And that's kind of just what he's doing very currently today. That's my message, just that he is constant.
What a great reminder for us, because it's in those constant relationships that we learn the most from. Even just our earthly relationships are constants when we have a constant marriage, when we have constant parents. And again, those come and go sometimes for some people with deaths. And but it's you learn so many lessons from those people that are always there for you. And I think that's a big thing, like you said, for you. I mean, somebody says they're for you, that means they're all in with you. And again, for God to be all in for us and being constant with us when he knows what's best for us, that's big. And that should build our faith. And I hope and pray that that builds people's faith that are listening this week, because we need it in the good times and the bad. And the times that we think we need the steps and the times I don't need to go up there. We always do, because he's constantly with us. And that's good, Heather. Yep. I think this is going to have to be part one. We're going to have to figure out when we're going to come in part two, because we didn't even talk about your story. I mean, that much, just because I know that he has seen you through so many things. And we didn't even do the book that you're going to write called He Saw Me.
Don't put that out there.
No, we're going to write that book. I'm telling you. Well, that's good stuff, Heather. Thank you so much. This was a last minute ask. This is something you've been on my radar to ask for a little bit, but we didn't get a chance to get a guest in this week. So I think I asked you Monday night. Tuesday night? I don't know.
It was not Monday.
You've had 2 or 3 days.
It was like midweek.
Yes.
And you were like, hey, someone backed out. And I'm like, I don't want to be your backup, but okay, yeah, I'll do it.
But I'll do it. Well, thank you so much, Heather. Again, this is super, super helpful for all of us. And I hope it builds our faith to remember that we have a constant God that is always in our corner. Good stuff, Heather.
Thank you. Thank you.
And that's it for the episode number 69 of the Central Weekly. Thanks so much for joining us. And a big thank you to our guest, Heather Luttinen.
It was really a positive experience.
A positive? What does that mean?
It was a spa.
Gosh, you really reached for that one.
I don't know. That was pretty good. Thank you, Heather.
I can't fathom the jokes that you... Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's... fathom is a legitimate maritime term.
Yeah. Again, not a lot of maritimers. Yeah, we're playing locked.
In any case...
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back next week as we wrap up boats, and we're going to look at week 6, and we're looking at the disciples.
We're looking at the disciples.
And we're talking fish.
A boat of abundance.
Boat of abundance. Say that 5 times fast. Go now. See you later next week. Oh, you can do it?
You want me to do it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Boat of abundance, boat of abundance, boat of abundance, boat of abundance, boat of abundance.
You excel. Good job.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, everybody.